ability by boxing you in with a diagnosis. B, it teaches you to become obsessed with yourself. And C, it teaches you to stereotype others. Before I even address these, though, I need to repeat, in a sense, what I've kind of already probably said too many times over again in the video. What channels are you accusing of doing this? Because even though it is, I guess it's a community, but like I keep on saying, we're all, and even though there is agreement, we're all also saying different things, and people have, especially with things like this, which don't have much to do with the actual things that are being said, but just simply kind of the style of the content and the fact that it's typological or psychological at all. You know, with that, you really need to specify who you're talking about, because different people talk about the same things in very different way that have different effects. So, you know, typology is not a whole. There's no official website for typology, and I'm getting off topic again, but it just feels like they've grouped them all. It's like with the existentialist philosophers, where Sartre tried to say, this is what existentialism is, and you're all existentialist philosophers. And all three of those philosophers are like, if that's what existentialism is, then I am not an existentialist. And that's kind of how the typology community is. It's like, yeah, they're all, quote, existentialists. They're all typologists, but they all disagree. Anyway, I've said that point way too many times than I need to. I was only saying it because for the sake of argument, I'm just going to treat the accusations about typology corrupting people as though he's referring specifically to my channel, because I know that he basically is he's not targeting me only, but I know that he has me in mind. So well, okay, I also need to say this, that because I'm going to address them on their own terms, but there's also the fact that I've kind of had to extrapolate these points from the video, because he does what a lot of people do when they complain about typology, and that's the points and the remarks that people make are often not logical or necessary. They don't logically follow. What he draws a lot from personal experience, and that's fine. I do that all the time, but you can't regard personal experience as always and necessarily the case. These are subjective insights. They're not objective realities. So it may very well be true, for instance, that INTJ would have used typology to say that he and his ISFJ wife are incompatible because they don't share all the cognitive functions, and therefore he would not have married her. That's one of the points that he makes, why typology is evil, I guess. I'm going to be kind of callous here. That's too bad for you, because there's no guarantee that I'm going to do that. But you're talking as though there is, and you're talking as though everybody else is. I'm sorry that's happened to you. I know that that's probably been the case with a lot of other people, but it's also not been the case for a lot of other people. And people like me are trying to explain, you shouldn't do that. Actually, on the contrary, that's a misuse, because you can do the exact opposite thing. For instance, I was once dating this, and it's kind of interesting because he's an INTJ with an ISFJ. It's a similar relationship. It was an ISTJ girl who I was dating. And here's, we both thought we were both very attractive. We went on a date or two, and we were trying to have conversation, but neither of us felt like it was really quite penetrating to the depth of the level. But my understanding of typology was kind of what helped perpetuate it more, because I was able to kind of figure out, okay, this is more of what's interesting to her. This seems to be more of how she thinks. I shouldn't be put off or frustrated or think that she's not a deep person because she says things in this more ISTJ related way, or says it through these functions. Actually, what she's saying is rather deep. I just need to appreciate it for what it is. So it actually had the opposite effect in a weird way, where someone may very well marry someone. I don't know. It's the point of it is it's supposed to be something that you use in order to transcend some of the differences that would break people apart improperly. The tool does not corrupt people. Corrupt people use the tool. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I don't know. So concerning the actual accusations that he makes, first, am I teaching non-accountability via diagnosis, via psychological diagnosis? So to answer the first part of that, no. In fact, I have specifically avoided anything that might lead to that. That is why my ideas strive to be non-behaviorist. I don't want to tell you this is what you're going to do. If I said that certain types will always do certain things, like actually do them, then that would definitely be, sort of an attempt to remove accountability, or, an attempt to. But I've never said that. If I ever have, then I apologize. Tell me where, and I'll retract it. In fact, that's one of the complaints made against my channel, is that I'm not concrete enough. I don't tell you what you're going to do. I get too abstract, and I think that's a valid problem that I sometimes run into. And sometimes it's a little too highfalutin, but that's because I'm trying not to take away your accountability and tell you what you're going to do. I don't want to take away people's agency. One of the problems with this argument then also is that it presupposes that people are not accountable for their buying into a non-accountability philosophy, right? So it's as though I'm acting upon them by corrupting them with my doctrines, but that's treating them like they're sheep, as though they didn't know any better. If you buy into something like that, then that's your fault, man. Like, you can't pin it all on me. I have a whole paragraph here on, I'm going to skip that because it's more of a polemic. It's not, but there's a part in the video that, well, I don't know. This is more of just, this is just picking low-hanging fruit. It's not really. He talks about diagnosis. It seems pretty clear that he doesn't just apply the non-accountability thing to Myers-Briggs. He applies it to psychology in general, which is absolutely absurd. Okay, fine. I'll just go ahead and read it. Let's talk about diagnosis. There's a common idea, it's not just with him, that psychological diagnosis is, in general, a means to deny people's accountability. You tell somebody that, oh, you're not lazy, you have depression. That's the most callous way, you could put it. And I think a lot of people think that, whether they say it or not. The opposite is true. If a person does not understand themselves, that they are mortal, for instance, or that they're susceptible to addictions, like addictions that all human beings have to avoid, or that they are genetically predisposed to diabetes, then they can't make informed decisions with their agency. So by not informing them, you have taken away their accountability. By not informing them. If you do not understand, for instance, that you are hypoglycemic because your doctor didn't tell you, and then you decide, not thinking anything of it, that you're going to go on a 50-mile hike without the proper supplies, then you're going to run into trouble. That's probably not the best example because I'm not a doctor. I probably look like an idiot, but... Okay, another example. Let's say that you don't admit to yourself that you're actually really strong. This is a really weird example because obviously people who lift know that they're strong. But if for some reason you didn't admit that to yourself, and then a kid was pinned under a car and you had the ability to lift up that car, but you were telling yourself that you didn't think you could do it, that's a problem. You're taking away you were accountable for that, but you were acting as though you didn't because you didn't choose to have the knowledge. So, people don't like to admit it, but the same thing goes for psychological diagnoses, whether you like it or not. If you do not understand that there's a deficiency of serotonin in your brain that's contributing heavily to your depression, then you will not make the steps that would help remedy that situation so that you can be a better husband and a better father and a better coworker. Because you have it in your head that you should be able to make through it with just willpower, and you're not going to succumb to this notion that it's actually serotonin is a major problem in it. Yeah, there's a component that you need to be able to get yourself up out of bed. But you know what, man? I've met people who've struggled with depression, and there is a big difference when they have their medication and they're working to get out of bed in the morning and when they don't. Sorry. Anyway. So moving on to typology. Typology, just so you know, is not as serious as that. as I keep on saying. But I think if you're in a marriage and you don't know about typology, I think if you both do everything in your power to love each other, then you're going to do just fine. Okay? But I think typology can help make it a little bit easier for you. So I'm not going to stop talking about it. In fact, I think it can make it a lot easier. I think that I've met people who have been in relationships who they hear about the notions and they're not corrupted by them. They hear them, they're often far more skeptical than I think would be good for them. They're kind of like, okay, that's interesting, and they take what works for them. They take what they subjectively agree with and what has worked and what they see to work in their life, and they say, that's why people make videos and go on YouTube looking for more information, because they're dissatisfied with what other people have said, but they feel like there's something here. I've gone off topic again. The goal here then, and maybe it doesn't always work because people misuse it. Maybe somebody out there who's watched my video on INTJs somehow has extrapolated me saying something about INTJs. I don't even know what it would have been. And then says, well, Michael Pierce told me that this is what INTJs do, and so I'm not accountable for it. I don't really know what to say to you because that wasn't the point, and you've completely missed it. The point was to suggest, is this how you are? And if so, then this is the reason why, and so that you might have more of a choice in whether or not you like that situation or not, or if you like the way that you express that. Express yourself that way, and you're not going to be able to change it unless you have all the facts in. So, moving on, I don't even think I need to spend much time on this point. Does it make you obsessed with yourself? I don't know. Talk to the individual people who it happens to. I don't think so, because you should be concerned with yourself insofar as it concerns you being ethical. If typology makes you obsessed with yourself, then that means that ethics and religion makes you obsessed with yourself, because it makes you so utterly concerned with whether or not what you're doing is wrong. So if it's wrong to be obsessed with yourself in that way, then okay, but I don't think that's the intention, most people say. And finally, the third point, I actually think this is a really good point, which probably sounds weird for me, who has clearly been upset by this video. And now I'm kind of like, I actually like this point. Maybe I would like other points. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood, but do I teach people to stereotype others? Now, he does talk about the stereotyping, but the main thing, it's kind of hilarious that at the beginning of this video I said, I'm not really trying to target this video, and it's like I keep on referencing this video. I don't know, man. But the point is, the thing that was particularly interesting to me was the idea that when you start buying into these categories, we'll say, and then you start noticing that people fit into these categories, then it becomes very easy. And I know that I've done this, or at least threatened to do this with myself. Let's take a type like ENFP. If something bad happens to you with ENFPs, and by the way, you see this all the time on forums, and maybe I've spoken too soon because there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the forums, but someone will have a bad experience. I shouldn't have said anything about forums because there's probably a good forum out there and I just don't know about it. Gosh dang it. I don't know, but that's what comment sections are for, supposedly. Anyway, I'm going to finally make my point. If you have an ENFP and something bad happens to you with that ENFP, it becomes very, very easy, now that you know what an ENFP looks like, or you think you know what they look like, let me focus on me, to then, whenever you meet another ENFP, kind of have bad flashbacks. That's definitely a problem. The thing is that that's not unique to typology at all. We do that anyway. In fact, that's often a very useful tool, but with typology, that shouldn't be how you're thinking, but you're going to do it anyway. Typology didn't invent it. In fact, typology, so for instance, if it happens all the time that, for instance, I'll take a radical example. If somebody's abused by somebody who does the abuse in certain ways, and they've gotten out of the relationship, and they've recognized what those things are, then they're going to be hypersensitive to whenever those things show up. Even if they're done innocuously. Maybe that's not the best example, but if anybody looks like that person, or if they do something that seems to make them act like that person because they're an imperfect human, then they zone in on that. We zone in on things all the time. It's kind of how we're wired, so it's not unique to typology, but it is definitely something to be aware of and to be careful. Just because that ENFP did that doesn't mean it's an ENFP thing. You can explain why they did that in terms of ENFP, and maybe you'll find a cool thing where somebody does sort of an opposite thing, but it's like in an ENFP way. I'm probably not making sense, but anyway, the way I'm going to conclude this particular section is, even granted that these are potential problems with typology as a whole, it's jumping the gun to say that we should discard all of typology because of them. Many things are dangerous, but they're still really useful. In fact, the most useful things are often the most dangerous. You can sow a field with your hands, and you won't probably kill any animals if you do that, but it'll take you forever, and you'll spend pretty much your whole life farming. Or you could get a plow, and that'll speed things up, but you might accidentally kill a mouse or something, and that's a bit better. Or you can use a harvester, which we're not talking about animals anymore. There's a lot of, if you misuse that thing, you're going to like rip your arm off like from a horror movie. But it's incredibly powerful, and we feed the world with those things, It gives us greater yield of crop than we've ever seen. So, and that seems to be a correlation all the time. You can drown in water, but you have to drink it. Religion is probably the best example, just to hit, let's go right for the most controversial thing. You get some of the best people and some of the worst people from the realms of devoted religion. By all means, call me out on that point. I don't know. Because it's a very powerful part of human beings, and I don't think you can go so far in the direction of being an incredibly good person without also increasing your potential that if you were to fall, then you'd cause a lot of damage. So with great power comes great responsibility, But anyway, so just because it has these problems, it doesn't mean what I think people want it to mean. Okay, kind of like in his video, I don't know, I felt like he kind of went off the rails at the end, and it's fine because I think I've kind of gone completely off the rails at this point, which is perfect timing because finally so the last part of the video, and I'm actually not going to talk a whole lot about this, but the last part of the video is where he talks about the quote dark side of MBTI and Enneagram and Jung. It's essentially a religious polemic against Jung. I even hesitate to say that. It's very sensationalist, but I'm going to address it because, well, first of all, before I even get into that, let's just say, because INTJ describes Jung on his website as forming like a satanic cult, and INTJ talks at considerable length about, not in detail, but a considerable length of mentioning things in sort of a mysterious way, about him participating in seances and talking to the dead and talking with Philemon, who was his imaginary friend, and supposedly getting the typology ideas from him. Let's assume that all of it is true in the way that INTJ has said. Jung is a completely morally decrepit, although INTJ never actually says that he's morally decrepit, he just sort of assumes that'd be self-evident, I guess. Let's assume that that's all true. why should we care? What does that have to do with typology? First of all, let's assume he was the Satan worshiper. Nevertheless, you have to judge his fruits on their own terms and not assume superstitiously that an idea proposed by someone morally reprehensible is necessarily in itself a bad idea. If that were true, then hardly anything ever said by anybody should be trusted, because we all fail to live up to our ideals and often contradict what we say with what we do. Jesus, I'm quoting Jesus now, which is a pretty good thing to quote, I think, but he said, "All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do." He's talking about the Pharisees. Do what they teach, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. So Jesus has literally just said, and by the way, the Pharisees are the people who were responsible for killing him. So they're like the worst of the worst, and killing him as I interpret it, they understood, at least the top dogs, that he was the Messiah. So he's saying that even those people who are the most reprehensible, they can still speak truth. They're just not actually doing it. So I'm not trying to make suggestions, I'm just saying as a point. So even if Jung is a nut job, which I don't think he is, at least not in the way that he's often described, that doesn't say anything about typology. And to continually insist so without any reasons kind of gets on my nerves. Okay? Now, as for what is actually brought up about Jung, and I was wondering if I'd even talk about this, simply because I'm not really an expert. The reason I'm not an expert is because there's so much information out there, and there's so much contradictory information. There's a lot of sensationalist information. I always get very, very wary whenever anybody has a book where basically they're trying to tear down somebody's reputation, and covering it in sort of an expose, covering it as, I'm revealing it to the masses. This is the real truth about so-and-so, and they were a complete psychopath. Did you not know that? I feel like it really goes back to the trying to shatter people's hopes and dreams. It's like trying to tell a little kid that Santa Claus isn't real, because it's like, maybe you should do that, but why are you doing that? Because there's a difference. There's a huge difference between how my parents told me, which was pretty gentle but also rational, and trying to have respect for how I felt about the matter. Yeah, I'm talking about Santa Claus not being real, but just as an example, there's a big difference between that and between a resentful, old, decrepit man who's bitter about the world looking at a little kid and intentionally tormenting them by telling them that Santa Claus isn't real in the most harsh way possible. There's an enormous difference between those two things. I bring that up because the ways in which many people have brought up there's a lot of weird stuff you can read about Jung. You can look at INTJ's video, although I don't know, man. Like, for instance, what he would do, as I understand it, is he would go into it was as an experiment where he would go into sort of a self-induced trance, in a sense, but I even hesitate to call it that, because what he says is he's going into high imagination, and this has been described as like super, he called it high imagination. Everybody talks about it as though it was like induced hallucinations. I don't know if that's actually what it was, because I have a really vivid imagination as well, and like, I can tell you, I can easily imagine a figure, like a presence right here. The presence isn't real. I wave my hand through, but I can imagine them. I can endow them with a personality using my imagination. So that's not anything new to me. And it's not weird. It's just I have a vivid imagination. And if there ever started to be a breakdown between, no, he's not actually real, then that would be a serious problem. But there isn't. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's just how it seems to me. I'm just looking at, I don't know, I can give them forearms, I can give them stuff like that. I probably sound like I'm insane right now, but the point is that I'm trying to say, you can think I'm insane because I have a vivid imagination, but I'm pretty sure everybody can do that, by the way. I think anyone can look to the side and imagine somebody who has four arms. It's just a matter of how vivid it is. Um, I don't even know why I'm talking about that, but yeah. The point is so Jung would induce the state where he would then have discussions with his quote imaginary friend, which Jung recognized, as I understand it, that it was his imaginary friend, although he said that this imaginary friend seemed to speak of its own volition and say things that Jung himself had not thought of. But if you read Jung and you understand him, it's pretty clear that what Jung means is that Jung believed he was speaking to a avatar of his own unconscious. So he was talking to himself. It just didn't seem that way because he thought there was a huge separation between the conscious and the unconscious mind. It's still weird. It's still weird. Um, Maybe I probably shouldn't even be, I don't know. But I'm bringing it up because I do think it's kind of interesting, and I think it's frustrating, and I think it would be, I'm not going to just not say anything, because one of the problems is that INTJ, the way that he talks about it is, he doesn't have a whole lot of intellectual charity. I know that probably sounds pretty petty, because especially with something that's really, really weird, it's like, it's understandable why you wouldn't have a whole lot of intellectual charity, but at the same time, it's kind of like, it still reflects on an attitude that the goal here is to try to mess up someone's reputation rather than not judging and actually self-reflecting and wondering whether or not you might actually connect with what Jung was doing there. And maybe you don't actually like that, but you can understand why Jung did it. I don't know. So I think that's everything I have to say. The point with the whole Philemon thing, and once again, I don't know a whole lot, but according to INTJ, he would go into these states and then commune with this Philemon, where you just have conversations. I don't know what else Jung did, but supposedly he got all the information from Philemon. I don't know, that once again is not addressing the ideas of typology. It's just trying to poison the well. I don't care if it came from, if a schizophrenic thinks that he's talking about something, but then, like John Nash was a schizophrenic and he did incredible mathematical work. If he kept saying that he was getting that mathematical work from some other source, but the math worked, then that would be creepy, but the math works, so that's not an issue here. Anyway, if anybody else knows any more information about that, feel free, because frankly, I don't think INTJ was representing it. He was obviously very, very biased. I don't know how this video will be received. It's very long, and I don't know if I've represented myself super well. Maybe you think I'm a weirdo or something, but I think what got me the most was when he mentions me, he mentions CelebrityTypes too. He's essentially saying that all the work I've done is, he didn't say it explicitly, unless I'm remembering wrong, but the implication was that the work I've done is based on what Jung got from it seems pretty clear that INTJ thinks it's a demon. He doesn't just think that it's a crazy person. I think he thinks it's a demon. And so the conclusion of his video was that me and CelebrityTypes are all demon worshippers. I can't speak for CelebrityTypes, but I'm a Mormon, so I guess in INTJ's view that's probably even worse. But I'm sorry, guys. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm probably taking it way too seriously. But anyway, please, it probably sounds weird for me to say, go wild in the comments. Tell me what doesn't make sense. Tell me where I'm wrong. Point out the problems. I can't promise that I'll make another video, but please read the comments on all my videos. Look through the info, see what you agree with, because if you don't like some of my arguments and you're like, you know what, no, you're wrong. There should be empirical things that you can test. dude, go ahead, please, go find them and prove me wrong, because I mean that's what it's all about. Anyway, I think I've said my piece. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, I'm angry at INTJ, but at the same time, I don't know the guy as a person. I don't, I don't know what his family life is like, and so I apologize um, if I've been angry or if I've come off as overly callous. Um, I know that's kind of a hollow apology because I'm still putting the video up, but I don't know. I'm just trying to offer something because uh, there's the least I can do. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Sorry for this long delay with the ESFJ video, but I just wanted to get some of my ideas up about it. So thanks for your patience, and I will see you in the next video when it comes out. Soon, hopefully. I shouldn't make promises. That never goes well. Okay. Thanks, everybody.